King Charles has named his youngest brother, Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh.
Royal watchers and curious fans around the world were left stunned when whispers began to spread that something important had been quietly hidden within Prince Edward's royal title. What first sounded like a minor detail quickly grew into a much bigger mystery, as insiders suggested that Queen Elizabeth had deliberately buried a powerful message in plain sight that could change the royal family's future. So, could there really be a hidden intention behind Edward's title? How did Queen Elizabeth cleverly use the law to create a hidden safeguard for Prince Edward? But what do you think Queen Elizabeth was really trying to do? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and to help us keep uncovering stories like this, make sure you subscribe so more people can stay informed. The secret power behind Edward's title. The moment that heavy legal letter, stamped with the official seal of Edinburgh solicitors, landed on the desk of King Charles III inside Buckingham Palace, everything changed. What seemed like a simple royal matter suddenly revealed something far more dangerous. The palace was forced to confront a chilling truth. Royal titles are not just decorative honors. They can carry real power, almost like a hidden weapon waiting for the right moment to be used. For more than 30 years, the royal household had quietly overlooked Prince Edward, seeing him as the calm, reserved figure in a family often filled with drama. But behind that quiet image, something far more powerful had been carefully built. Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip had spent decades creating a kind of legal shield around their youngest son, a safeguard designed to protect the royal family's private wealth from future interference, including from Queen Camilla. The story goes all the way back to November 19, 1947, when King George VI, sensing that the British Empire was entering a time of major change, issued a powerful royal order known as Letters Patent. This was no ordinary document, it was the highest form of royal command. Through it, he created the title Duke of Edinburgh for Philip Mountbatten. At the time, it seemed like a straightforward royal gesture, but hidden within its carefully crafted legal language were clauses that were never meant to fade away. Unlike most royal titles, which are largely symbolic and carry little real authority, the Edinburgh title was different. It was designed with long-term strategy in mind. Philip and Elizabeth ensured that it included special legal protections, rules that would not disappear when the title holder died. Instead, these powers would go into a kind of legal sleep, waiting quietly until the right successor came along to activate them again. When Prince Philip died in 2021, many inside the palace assumed those powers had ended with him. They treated the title like an empty position waiting to be filled. But the law does not follow emotion. It does not mourn or forget. The original 1947 document still existed, untouched in the archives, holding hidden authority that could only be unlocked by the right person. That moment came in June 2022, during the celebrations of the Platinum Jubilee of Elizabeth II. To the public, it looked like a simple, heartfelt gesture from a mother to her son. Queen Elizabeth II officially gave the Duke of Edinburgh title to Prince Edward, but the wording used was extremely important. The palace said the title was conferred, not granted. That single word changed everything. To grant something means to create it anew, but to confer means to pass on something that already exists, along with every hidden condition, every legal power, and every restriction attached to it. By choosing Edward, a son who had shown 30 years of steady loyalty without scandal, the Queen was not just honoring him, she was handing him control over a powerful legal mechanism. So why keep all this so quiet? Because Elizabeth was not just a monarch, she was a careful observer of history and palace politics. She had watched the growing influence of Queen Camilla and understood how much sway she held over King Charles III. The Queen knew that after her death, valuable private estates like Sandringham House and Balmoral Castle, worth hundreds of millions of pounds, could become vulnerable to changes in management that might weaken the family's long-term legacy. To prevent that, she turned Edward into a kind of legal safeguard. She tied special rights and protective clauses to his title, powers that could, under certain conditions, block or delay decisions made by the monarch if those decisions threatened the family's inherited wealth. In this way, Edward became something like a silent guardian of the royal estate, similar in authority to Princess Anne in certain matters. Then came late 2023. Now King Charles III began moving quickly to reorganize royal finances and properties. He focused on major assets, including income from the Duchy of Lancaster and private estates in Scotland. His goal seemed clear: to modernize and streamline the monarchy's operations, and many believed he was acting with guidance from his closest advisor, Queen Camilla. But then, everything stopped. A letter arrived. It was not a casual message between brothers. It was a formal legal warning, sent by lawyers representing Prince Edward. However, the document stated, in precise and unshakable language, that some of the king's recent decisions directly violated the original 1947 legal provisions. Who held the title before? Were they in the same cadre with Edward? Let's find out. Queen Elizabeth's secret move. From the time of Duke of Gloucester to the era of the celebrated naval figure Prince Philip, the title of Duke of Edinburgh has never been just a fancy honor. It has always been reserved for the most loyal and dependable members of the royal family, the steady figures whose main duty is to protect and strengthen the very foundation of the throne. For Prince Edward, the journey to receiving this powerful title was far from certain. In 2021, reports suggested that King Charles III was considering keeping the title for himself or simply letting it fade into history. But everything changed in 2022 when Queen Elizabeth II stepped in with a firm and undeniable royal command, one that completely overruled Charles's wishes. She saw something in Edward that others often overlooked. He was calm, reliable, and deeply private, a man who once ran a production company, married Sophie Rhys-Jones, and never betrayed the family by leaking secrets to the press. In the Queen's eyes, he was the only person worthy of the 1947 mandate, because he was the only one who would never misuse it for personal pride or attention. Even though the Queen is no longer alive, this carefully planned legal move ensures that her influence still lingers powerfully behind the scenes. It is the invisible hand of a monarch who ruled for 70 years, someone who understood that while crowns may pass from one head to another, the law is what truly endures. By relying on the letters patent of 1947, she made sure that her youngest son would hold a quiet but significant power, the ability to protect the Windsor bloodline and its legacy, even when she was no longer there to guide decisions, or to resist the growing influence of Camilla. As royal lawyers rushed to re-examine documents that had not been touched in decades, a startling truth began to emerge. The Duke of Edinburgh was no longer the overlooked prince in the background. He had become something far more important, a guardian of hidden legal details, a man holding authority that could one day reshape the monarchy itself. While the world admired the grand celebrations of the Platinum Jubilee in 2022, something far more calculated was unfolding quietly behind the heavy curtains of Windsor Castle. Queen Elizabeth II was not simply celebrating 70 years on the throne. She was carefully securing the future. She understood her eldest son, King Charles III, very well. He often acted with emotional idealism and a desire to move quickly, and he had long been deeply influenced by the woman he fought for decades to bring into royal life, Camilla. For both the Queen and Prince Philip, this growing influence was not a personal issue. It was a matter of protecting the institution itself. As Camilla rose from Duchess of Cornwall to Queen Consort, her voice carried more and more weight in the king's decisions. The Queen quietly worried that the idea of a slimmed-down monarchy might not only be about efficiency, but also about concentrating control over private royal estates, like Sandringham House and Balmoral Castle, potentially at the expense of other members of the royal family, especially Edward and Princess Anne. To prevent this, the Queen reached back to a powerful legal tool from 1947. This was her masterstroke. By granting Edward the title of Duke of Edinburgh, she was not just giving him a name. She was activating a hidden layer of authority that had been built into the system by Prince Philip himself. Philip, known for his military discipline and precision, had ensured that the 1947 document included strict and unchangeable rights. These rules meant that certain royal lands and income streams could not simply be controlled or disposed of by the king alone. Instead, they would exist in a protected legal state, with the Duke of Edinburgh acting as a kind of constitutional guardian, watching, protecting, and ensuring that these assets remained intact for the royal family. The Queen and Philip had designed these safeguards very carefully. Their goal was clear: no royal spouse, no matter how influential, should ever be able to persuade the monarch to sell, lease, or redirect family wealth that had already been set aside for future generations. And in the end, the responsibility for this quiet but immense power fell to Prince Edward, the often underestimated, soft-spoken prince. Behind his calm and modest image, he now stood as the chosen guardian of a hidden royal safeguard, entrusted with protecting the legacy of the House of Windsor itself. What did the Queen see in Edward? What authority does the title confer on Edward? Let's take a closer look. Edward's legal authority. The Queen recognized something very important in Edward. She saw in him the same steady strength that Prince Philip had always shown, the ability to stand firm, stay calm under pressure, and protect what truly mattered. This quality was not loud or dramatic, but it was powerful. It was the kind of strength that could quietly hold everything together when things around it began to shake. Because of this, when Edward received the special legal authority that dated back to 1947, his role became far more than just symbolic. He was no longer simply a royal with a title. He became a living safeguard within the system. In a way, he acted as a balance to the king's power, ensuring that no single decision could go too far without being questioned. His position gave him a kind of quiet authority that could step in when needed. This role was similar to the way Princess Anne operates within the royal family. Known for her strict and disciplined approach, she manages royal responsibilities, especially those tied to estates and agriculture, with firm control. Like her, Edward was trusted with serious responsibility. But in his case, it went even deeper. He was given legal power that allowed him to challenge or even block certain decisions if they threatened the structure or fairness of royal arrangements. For example, if Camilla had proposed changes to how income from Balmoral was handled, perhaps adjusting it in a way that benefited her personal interests or her non-royal family members, Edward had the authority to step in. His legal team could bring forward official documents and clearly state that such actions were not allowed under the law. These were not just opinions or traditions. They were written, binding rules. One of the most powerful parts of these old legal documents was something called an anti-invalidation clause. In simple terms, this meant that the rights given under those documents could not easily be cancelled or ignored. In normal situations, a king's word can influence or even change how things are done within the palace. But these documents were different. They were issued as formal acts of law, known as letters patent, which stand above personal decisions. Even a reigning monarch could not simply erase them on a whim. Queen Elizabeth II made sure that the rights connected to the Duke of Edinburgh title, especially those tied to private estates, were protected in this way. She designed it so that they could not be taken away or weakened easily. It was a careful and deliberate move, one that would only reveal its full impact later. When King Charles III began his efforts to modernize and streamline royal finances in 2023, he believed he had full control. He moved forward with confidence, assuming his authority was complete. But what he did not fully realize was that by granting Edward the Duke of Edinburgh title, he had also activated those hidden legal protections. Without intending to, he had given his younger brother the power to block or challenge decisions related to the various states he was trying to reorganize. In a sense, this was the Queen's final, carefully planned move, a way of extending her influence even after her passing. She understood her son well. She knew that out of respect and emotional duty, he would give Edward the title. And by doing so, he would unknowingly step into a legal framework she had already prepared. It was like setting a trap made not of force, but of law and tradition. As Edward's legal team began to formally question the king's handling of the Scottish estates, tension grew within the palace. The atmosphere became heavy, filled with unspoken conflict. Different groups within the royal circle began to take sides. Those close to Camilla saw Edward's actions as a betrayal. To them, it looked like he was taking advantage of a difficult moment, especially as the king was dealing with serious health challenges. They believed he was using old, outdated legal documents to block progress and secure financial advantage for himself. But others saw the situation in a completely different light. Loyal supporters viewed Edward not as a rival, but as a protector. In their eyes, he was not attacking his brother at all. Instead, he was defending the long-term stability and fairness of the monarchy. Was Edward a secret schemer, taking advantage of a sick king? Or was he the careful protector of the rules, standing as the last guard against the mishandling of the royal estates? Let's take a closer look. Royal legal battle. As the legal battle quietly roared behind the heavily insulated walls of Buckingham Palace, the true significance of the Edinburgh Mandate began to creep out from the shadows of the 1947 letters patent. This was never just about a fancy title to appear on stationery or invitations. At its heart, it was about safeguarding the very lifeblood of the Windsor family. Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip understood something fundamental that King Charles, in his drive to modernize and slim down the monarchy, seemed to have overlooked. True independence for a royal comes only from private property. Without the ancestral estates of Sandringham and Balmoral, the monarch's children are little more than tenants of the state, dependent and constrained. The Queen's hidden instructions to Edward were designed to ensure that these estates remained a protective barrier for the family, shielded from the prying hands of those who lacked Windsor blood, particularly advisors and interests aligned with Queen Camilla. Buried in the 1947 documents was a rare legal instrument known as an irrevocable covenant of management. Decades ago, when Prince Philip helped draft these rules, he insisted on including a clause granting the Duke of Edinburgh co-trustee powers over certain private income streams. This authority did not belong to Edward personally, but to the title itself, which was formally conferred upon him in 2022. By inheriting this position, Edward gained an extraordinary legal standing. He could freeze or veto any structural changes to the estates that might threaten the hereditary line. This was not a mere ceremonial privilege. It was arguably the most powerful royal legal mechanism of the century. Just as Princess Anne maintains specialized authority over the royal stables and agricultural holdings, Edward received a financial veto over the private estates. When King Charles, potentially influenced by Camilla's desire to consolidate wealth to fund a restructured monarchy, attempted to streamline Balmoral revenues in 2023, he found himself stopped cold. Edward's lawyers presented the 1947 mandate, proving that the king literally had no legal power to dissolve these provisions. The late queen had, in effect, built an unbreakable safety net into the law. The king could govern the nation, but the Duke of Edinburgh would guard the family's private fortune. Choosing Edward for this role was a masterclass in judgment by Queen Elizabeth. Exercising such veto power required someone of absolute discretion, unwavering loyalty, and zero personal ambition. Historically, the Dukedom of Edinburgh had been held by men of iron will: Prince Alfred, the steadfast naval prince, and Prince Philip, the modernizing force. Both understood that their purpose was to support the crown, not overshadow it. Edward proved himself in the quiet shadows for 30 years. While Charles and Andrew faced public scandals that tarnished the monarchy's image, Edward remained unseen, silently building a reputation of flawless service. He absorbed the tabloids' narrative of weakness without complaint, quietly cementing 3 decades of dependable, invisible work. He was the only royal child whom the Queen could entrust with a loaded legal weapon, confident he would wield it solely to defend the monarchy, never for personal gain. When the formal legal letter finally arrived at the palace, it triggered an immediate information blackout. King Charles, already weighed down by his cancer diagnosis and the immense responsibility of the crown, faced a paradox. To challenge Edward publicly would be to admit that the late Queen had deliberately restricted his power from beyond the grave. To accept the reality privately would be to concede that Camilla's influence over the estates had been legally curtailed. What secret did the royal title reveal? Is it something the palace know of? Let's find out. Royal title revelation. In the final months of 2023, as winter fog clung to the turrets of Windsor Castle, a quiet but powerful shock rattled the foundations of the British monarchy. It wasn't caused by a scandal in the press or a political rebellion. It came from a stack of old, ink-stained papers written 75 years earlier. When King Charles III received an official legal letter from the council representing the Duke of Edinburgh, the mood inside the palace shifted dramatically. The warmth of a family mourning gave way to the cold precision of a courtroom. Charles, already grappling with the physical and emotional strain of a tough cancer diagnosis, was now facing a legal ghost from the past. The 1947 letters patent, signed by his grandfather King George VI to grant Prince Philip the title of Duke of Edinburgh, was not just a historic record of a title being handed down. To everyone's astonishment, it was revealed to carry real, binding power. For decades, many royal experts and palace insiders had assumed that titles were purely ceremonial, symbols of honor, carrying prestige but no real authority over the monarch. Yet this 1947 document, carefully reviewed by Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip in the later years of her reign, contained a specific and powerful clause. It declared that the holder of the Duke of Edinburgh title would act as a permanent guardian of the royal family's private estates. Unlike the Crown Estate, which is managed by the government, properties like Sandringham and Balmoral are privately owned by the Windsor family. Under the 1947 mandate, the Duke of Edinburgh was granted 2 critical powers: a reversionary interest and a negative covenant. In plain terms, this meant that even though the king officially owned these lands, he could not make major changes, sell them, or redirect their income without the duke's consent. By late 2023 and into early 2024, the drama centered on one uncomfortable truth: the Camilla factor. Insiders suggest that Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip had grown increasingly worried about King Charles's modernization plans, many of which seemed influenced by Queen Camilla and her advisors. The concern was not just about modernizing the royal operations, but about the possible erosion of the Windsor family legacy. If Charles succeeded in consolidating the private family wealth into a single king's purse, the other children, Edward and Anne, could be pushed out of their inheritance or see their financial independence severely limited. Even though Elizabeth II was no longer alive to intervene, she had prepared a legal safeguard. By giving Prince Edward the Duke of Edinburgh title in June 2022 during the Platinum Jubilee, she activated the protections embedded in the 1947 document. She knew that Charles, bound by tradition and loyalty to his father's memory, would never refuse to grant Edward the title. In doing so, Charles unknowingly surrendered his full control over the family's private estates. To the king's legal team, the revelation was shocking. The 1947 letters patent contained an anti-invalidation clause. Simply put, not even the king could override the Duke of Edinburgh's legal rights. However, the only way to nullify these rights would be through a parliamentary act. Why did the Queen pick Edward? Is Edward her favorite in the royal family? Let's find out. How Edward became the monarchy's secret shield. For more than 30 years, Edward quietly proved himself. He was the only one in the family who wouldn't use power for personal gain or to stage a takeover. He was the man who worked when no one was watching, the one who endured decades of being called weak while secretly being prepared by his mother to act as the last safeguard for the monarchy. His strength was patience. He waited for the precise moment when the royal family faced the risk of influence from Camilla to activate the 1947 letters patent. When whispers of this legal move started leaking out, the public debate exploded. Edward showed himself as the ultimate loyalist. He was defending the Queen's final wishes and making sure the Windsors remained a family, not just a brand controlled by Charles and Camilla. He was the quiet hero, holding the line when the king could not see the danger himself. The timing of his legal action was ruthless, sending a challenge while his brother battled cancer and the Princess of Wales recovered from health issues could look like an ambush. Critics claimed Edward was merely protecting his share before the rules changed. But when the palace went silent after receiving the letter, it wasn't irritation, it was alarm. King Charles III, a man devoted to respecting institutions, realized that his mother had outmaneuvered him from beyond the grave. Through Edward's lawyers, the Queen's influence spoke again. The 1947 letters patent were no longer just history. They were active law. The son, once overlooked, had become the most powerful guardian in the United Kingdom. Edward didn't need to speak to the press. Holding the document was enough. For the first time, the quiet prince held all the cards in the battle over the royal estates. When Edward's legal letter arrived at Buckingham Palace in late 2023, it was not a family quarrel. It was a constitutional alarm. A modern king was now legally challenged by his own brother, using a document from decades ago. Charles, an institutionalist, did not dismiss it. Instead, the palace immediately called in external experts in constitutional and property law to review the 1947 letters patent. The king's usual legal team, focused on daily affairs, had completely missed this long-hidden legal trap. At the heart of the dispute were Sandringham and Balmoral. Following advice from Queen Camilla's strategic council, Charles had begun centralizing income from these estates, claiming efficiency. But legally, it was a consolidation of power. Edward's lawyers argued that this violated the 1947 mandate, which was designed to prevent anyone, especially a consort or advisor, from diverting family wealth away from the direct bloodline. By invoking these old rights, Edward placed a legal check on the king. He wasn't just asking for money, he was asserting the right to consent. From that moment, every decision about the private estates required the Duke of Edinburgh's approval. This was the anti-invalidation power in action, a check on the king that could not be paused, not even for illness. The timing, while harsh, was necessary. Supporters of Edward say he had no choice. The law does not wait for convenience. Had Charles been allowed to complete the estate consolidation, the protections of 1947 might have been erased forever. What do you think about the hidden secret behind Edward's title? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.